The wind howled outside like a wild animal. Snow slammed against the windows of a small outpost made of metal and stone. It stood alone on the edge of the wastelands, far from the nearest colony. Inside, a man sat by a fire. His name was Callan. Quiet man with tired eyes and hands scarred from old battles. He was once a medic in the frontier war, now just a forgotten survivor living in peace, far from people, far from noise. He liked silence. But tonight, the silence broke. Knock, knock, knock. Callan froze. No one ever came here. No visitors. No patrols. The snowstorm was too strong. He stood slowly, grabbing a small stun pistol from the wall. Quietly, he walked to the door. Again, knock, knock. He opened it. At first he thought it was a trick of the snow. But then he saw her, a thin alien woman, half covered in a torn blanket, her arms wrapped around her chest. Her skin was pale gold, lips cracked from the cold, and her feet were bare. She looked terrified. Before he could speak, she whispered in broken English, "Please, shelter. I offer myself. Anything. Just don't send me back." Callan blinked. "What?" "I give myself. For warmth. I clean. I obey. Just don't send me away." Then her knees gave out and she collapsed into the snow. He acted fast. Callan dragged her inside and shut the door. The heat from the fire wrapped around them like a blanket. He laid her down near the heater, checking her pulse. Weak, but alive. He gave her water. She drank fast, like she hadn't tasted clean liquid in days. He placed a blanket over her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said. She looked up, confused. "You don't want me?" Callan frowned. "Want you? I don't even know your name." She blinked. "Alira." "All right, Alira," he said slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you. You don't have to give yourself to me. I just don't leave people to freeze." She stared at him for a long time, like she couldn't believe what she just heard. Hours passed. Alira sat quietly near the fire, still wrapped in the blanket. Her eyes followed every movement Callan made. When he brought her soup, she flinched before reaching out. He watched her. She wasn't just cold. She was broken. Not from the storm. From something deeper. After she ate, she whispered, "You're human. And you're kind?" Callan raised an eyebrow. "Some of us are." She nodded slowly. "In the camps, they said no human gives shelter without price." Callan sat down across from her. "I'm not from any camp." Alira looked down. "I ran. I escaped. They traded us warmth for bodies. I was next." His fists clenched, but he kept his voice calm. "You're safe here." She looked up again. "Why?" "Because no one deserves that," he said simply. Later, she tried to wash the floor with a cloth. Her hands were shaking. Callan stopped her. "You don't need to do that. But I must repay you." He shook his head. "You're not a debt. You're a guest." That word made her pause. She repeated it softly. "Guest?" Then she asked, "Where do I sleep?" He pointed to the spare room. "There. It's warm and quiet." She hesitated. "You won't follow?" "No. Not even to touch me?" He stood still for a moment, then said firmly, "Alira, I'm not like those men." She studied his face. Then slowly, carefully, she walked to the door and stepped inside. Before closing it, she whispered, "Thank you, Callan." That night, Callan sat alone by the fire. Outside, the wind was still strong, but for the first time in years, someone else was breathing under his roof, and even though he didn't say it out loud, deep in his heart he knew everything was about to change. The storm outside had passed, but inside Callan's outpost, a softer storm remained. Quiet, careful, and wounded. Morning came slowly. Pale blue light leaked through the frost-covered windows. Callan made warm broth, his movements steady, but his thoughts unsettled. The strange alien girl was still here, alive, sleeping, and yet he didn't know what to do with her. He walked to the spare room and knocked gently on the wall. No answer. He opened the door slowly. Alira was curled under the blanket, eyes open but distant, as if she had never really slept. Her back was pressed against the wall like she expected someone to grab her at any moment. "You didn't rest?" Callan asked softly. She shook her head. "I forget how." He sighed and stepped in with a bowl of broth. "Eat. You'll feel stronger." She sat, up wary. When he handed her the bowl, her hands trembled slightly. After a few careful sips, she finally spoke. "Why did you not touch me last night?" Callan blinked. "Why would I?" "That's the rule," she said, eyes lowered. "Shelter is paid with skin. I was taught that." He sat down on the edge of the bed, not close, not threatening. "That's not a rule here, not in this house." She looked up at him slowly. "Then, what do you want from me?" "Nothing." She stared at him as if he had spoken in another language. "Nothing? You were cold. You were dying. That was enough reason." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away fast. "I don't understand. You gave me warmth and food. Now you give me safety. This feels like a lie." Callan looked away. "I thought the same thing once when someone helped me and I didn't know why." Alira tilted her head. "Someone helped you?" He nodded. "During the war, I lost my unit. An alien family found me bleeding. They had no reason to help me, but they did. They gave me shelter. Then they died the next day because they were seen helping a human." Alira was silent. Callan's voice cracked. "I lived. They didn't." After a pause, Alira whispered, "That's why you helped me." "I wasn't fast enough to save them," he said. "I won't make that mistake again." Later that day, she followed him into the kitchen area, watching him carefully. Every time he turned, she flinched slightly, like expecting sudden punishment. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "You said I don't owe you anything, that I'm not a debt." "You're not. Then, can I help you anyway?" Callan smiled. "If you want." She walked over to a crate of supplies and began sorting carefully, like she was afraid to break something. But she was careful. Quiet. Fast. "Used to doing this?" Callan asked. She nodded. "In the camp, we were trained to clean, sort, serve. They said order brings value. You don't have to prove your value here," he said. She paused. "Then what makes me valuable?" "You're alive," he answered simply. "That's enough." As evening came, Alira sat by the fire with a cup of warm liquid in her hands. She watched the flames dance and flicker, her expression softer than before. She turned to Callan, who was fixing a cracked tool on the table. "My name is Alira," she said suddenly. Callan looked up. "I know." "No. I mean, that's not what they called me in the camp. They gave me a number." He nodded slowly. "Then tell me who you were before that." She was quiet for a moment. "My name means star leaf in my tribe's language. I was born during the falling petals. My mother said my eyes were bright like the sky at night." "That sounds beautiful," Callan said. "She was beautiful too. She hid me when the slavers came." Alira looked down. "She didn't survive." Callan closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," Alira whispered. "That was the last time I heard my real name, until now." The fire crackled. She looked at him. "Do you believe names matter?" "Yes," he said. "Because names are not given by owners. They're given by people who care." Alira smiled, faintly, nervously. "Then, you can say my name again. I think I'd like that." He nodded. "All right, Alira. She repeated it under her breath. Alira. And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't sound broken. She sounded found. Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, the warmth wasn't just from the fire anymore. The snow outside had turned to ice, crisp and silent under the dark sky. Stars shone through the cold night like quiet watchers, blinking from beyond the void. Inside Callan's outpost, the fire glowed softly. The old heater hummed. The walls creaked gently from the cold wind pressing outside. But inside, it was peaceful. Alira sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully peeling dried fruit with a small knife. Callan had shown her how to prepare rations earlier, and now she insisted on helping. With every meal, "I do it slow," she said quietly, "but clean. You do it right," Callan replied. "That's better than fast." She looked up, slightly surprised by the compliment. "You really mean that?" "I don't waste words, Alira." She looked down again, but this time, not out of shame. Something inside her was changing. She was no longer moving like prey expecting a strike. She was learning to breathe again. That night, Callan showed her something strange. An old piece of tech, half rusted, still blinking weakly. "What is it?" Alira asked. "Music player," he said. "Old one." He placed a small disc into the side and pressed a button. The machine crackled, then a soft melody began to play. Simple notes, calm and slow. Alira stared at it in wonder. "Is this a machine singing?" He chuckled. "Close enough." She listened quietly, her head tilting like a curious bird. The melody flowed through the air, slow and warm, like sunlight through fog. "This is beautiful," she whispered. He watched her face. For the first time, her eyes softened, not from fear or tears, but from memory. She closed her eyes and said, "My mother used to sing. Before the camps." I forgot her voice. Callan turned the music down, letting the silence settle like snowflakes. "Tell me about her." Alira hesitated, then nodded slowly. She had silver hair and 3 earrings in one ear. She made dresses from soft leaf fiber. She used to say, "We are not rich, but our hearts are full." Callan smiled. "She sounds like someone worth remembering." Alira's voice shook. "They burned our hut, took her away. I still remember the smoke." Callan's expression darkened. He sat beside her on the floor, not too close. "She kept you alive," he said. "Yes," Alira whispered. "But after she was gone, I stopped smiling. I thought, if I smiled, it meant I forgot her." Callan was quiet. Then he said, "Smiling doesn't mean forgetting." She looked at him. "It means healing." Later, she helped him repair a broken panel near the heater. Her fingers were smaller and could reach where his couldn't. He guided her gently, patient and clear. When they finished, she looked at the now working light and said, "I fixed something." He nodded. "You did?" A strange joy sparkled in her eyes. Then, just for a second, she smiled. Real, pure, not forced. It was small, but Callan noticed, and she saw that he saw. Her eyes widened in alarm. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly, backing away. "I wasn't trying to." Hey, Callan said, raising both hands. "It's okay." She pressed her hands over her mouth. "I didn't know I could still do that." "You can," he said softly. "And you should." She sat down again slowly, hands still shaking. "I thought if I smiled, it meant I was weak, or worse, forgetting what happened to me." "No," he said. "It means you're remembering who you were before it happened." She looked at the fire, then slowly turned back to him. "Do you smile?" He shrugged. "Not often." "Why not?" "I guess I forgot how." Alira thought for a second, then said, "Then maybe we learn again, both of us." Callan smiled. A real one. Outside, the stars were still. Inside, for the first time in a long time, 2 souls had shared something gentle, not survival, not pain, but possibility. The days after the smile were quiet. Alira woke each morning before the sun, cleaned the rooms, organized supplies, and checked the heater. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. This place, for the first time in her life, felt like hers too. Callan never told her what to do. He didn't ask for anything. Still, she did more each day, because he looked at her like a person, not a tool, and when he smiled now, it reached his eyes. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they worked side by side without words. And sometimes they just sat in silence. Together. One evening, Callan returned from a short supply run to a local trade hub. He placed his bag down on the table and sighed. "I heard a name I don't like." Alira looked up from where she was slicing fruit. "Who?" Callan met her eyes. "Varn." Her hand stopped moving. She went still. Then whispered, "The chain master?" Callan nodded slowly. "Someone said he was asking questions. About a girl. About my outpost." Alira's face lost all color. "I didn't think he'd come this far," she said, voice trembling. Callan stepped closer. "I won't let him take you." She shook her head. "He doesn't take. He breaks, and then collects the pieces." That night, Alira didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, arms around her knees, rocking slightly. Callan brought her tea. She didn't touch it. He sat beside her. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He doesn't need weapons. His voice is enough. His words dig into you like hooks. He makes you believe you belong to him." She looked at Callan. "He'll come. He always does." Callan placed his hand gently on hers, then let him. 3 days later, the storm came first, loud and fast like a scream across the sky. Then came the engine hum. A hover transport, dark gray and low to the ground, moved through the snow like a beast hunting prey. Callan stood outside with a long coat and his old pulse rifle in hand. He didn't hide. Alira stood at the window, heart pounding. The vehicle stopped 50 meters away. The hatch hissed open. Out stepped Varn, broad-shouldered with a slick black coat and a smile like a knife. His skin was pale, his eyes pale blue, too calm, too sure. 2 armed guards stood behind him, silent and ready. Varn raised one hand. "Callan, right?" "You're trespassing," Callan said. Varn laughed. "I came for something that belongs to me." "She's not a thing," Callan replied. Varn grinned wider. "Oh, I don't blame you. She's pretty, quiet, grateful. I trained her well." Inside the outpost, Alira flinched at his voice. She wasn't hearing a memory. She was hearing the real monster again. Callan didn't flinch. "Leave," he said. Varn tossed a data stick onto the snow between them. "Her ownership file. Legal on 3 colonies. That's proof she's mine." Callan didn't look down. "I don't care." Varn's tone sharpened. "This isn't your fight." "It is now." "Then she'll watch you die," Varn said coldly. "And I'll take her anyway." Suddenly, the lights on Varn's transport flickered. The guards looked back in confusion. Inside the outpost, Alira had plugged herself into the outer grid, using what she had learned from Callan. She had never touched a console before coming here. Now she shut down Varn's systems in under a minute. The engine stuttered. The weapons bay sealed. Varn turned slowly toward the building. She stepped out into the snow. No chains. No collar. No fear. "I'm not yours," she said loudly. Varn blinked. "You'll always be mine. You were bought. You didn't buy me. You stole me. You hurt us, burned us, made us believe we were nothing." She raised her chin. "But he taught me I'm more than something you can own." Callan stepped beside her. "You hurt her." Varn's hand twitched near his sidearm, but didn't move. He wasn't prepared for this, for both of them. He took one step back. "This isn't over." Callan raised his weapon. "Yes, it is." Varn hesitated, then turned. He got back into his hover transport. The guards followed, silent and unsure. The engine tried to roar, but sputtered. Alira had left just enough power for him to crawl away in shame. They watched the vehicle disappear into the storm. Back inside, Alira sank to the floor, hands shaking. "Thought I'd be brave," she said. "But I'm not. I'm still scared." Callan knelt beside her. "You stood outside. You faced him. You told the truth." He looked into her eyes. "You were braver than anyone I've ever known." That night, they didn't speak much, but something had changed. The outpost wasn't just a shelter anymore, it was hers too. Snow melted slowly outside the outpost. The storm had passed, and so had Varn, the slaver. But the fear he left behind took longer to fade. Alira stood by the window watching the sunrise. Orange light spilled across the snow. It was the first time she had ever watched a sunrise without thinking of escape. She placed a hand over her heart. She was still here, and no one had taken her. Behind her, Callan worked quietly at the console, typing into the system's old satellite, uplink. His brow was furrowed, his jaw set in focus. "What are you doing?" Alira asked. "Finishing something I should have done the day you arrived," he replied. He didn't look up, just kept typing. Subject: Citizen Protection Registration, Alien Refugee Class B Shelter. Sponsor: Callan Rowe Protected. Individual: Alira Vela, requesting full status under Colony Code 11.17, Sanctuary Rights. A green bar appeared on the screen. Approved. He leaned back. Alira stepped forward slowly. What did you do?" He turned toward her. "I made it official. You're protected now. Under human law. No one can claim you again." Her lips parted slightly. "So, I'm safe?" He nodded. "And free." Alira sat down on the edge of the table. "Free," she repeated the word like it was new. Then she looked down. "But I still don't feel free." Callan listened. He didn't speak right away. Alira continued. "I keep waiting for someone to pull me back, to call me nothing, to remind me I was property." She looked at him, her voice shaking. "Even though I'm safe now, I don't know who I am." He stood, crossed the room, and sat beside her. "Let's start with what you're not," he said. "You're not a slave. You're not a number. You're not something to be used. You're Alira. And you're still writing the rest." She looked at him, her eyes wet but clear. "Can I ask something strange?" "Sure. When you first saw me at the door, did you see someone worth saving?" He thought for a moment. "No," he said. She looked down, but he continued. "I saw someone who needed saving. And the rest? I saw later." Alira blinked. "What did you see later?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who fixed my broken heater. Someone who organized my supplies better than I ever did. Someone who smiled, after thinking she never could again." She laughed softly through her tears. "You forgot someone who almost burned your soup." He chuckled. "That too." Later that day, Alira stepped outside alone for the first time since Varn came. The wind was gentle. The light touched her skin. She walked slowly to the edge of the snowbank, where small green sprouts had begun to push through the white. Life was stubborn. So was she. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm still here." Then for the first time she said her name aloud, not in fear, not as a secret, but as a truth. "I am Alira." That evening, Callan was working on repairs when she returned. He didn't ask where she had gone. She placed a small rock in front of him, a flat one with a symbol scratched into it using a knife. "What's this?" he asked. "A namestone," she said. "From my tribe. We carve it when we know we are someone again." He turned it over and saw her symbol, a small star leaf surrounded by open hands. "I made one for myself," she said. Then she held up another, blank. "I want you to make one too, so you remember that you're someone too." He stared at it, quiet. Then slowly he picked it up and smiled. That night they shared tea beside the fire. No chains, No secrets, no debts, just two people, sitting in peace. And when Alira closed her eyes that night, she didn't dream of cages, she dreamed of open doors. The days were brighter now, not just because the sun stayed out longer, or because the snow melted faster. Something had changed inside the outpost too, something warmer. Alira moved freely. Now, she laughed without fear. She even sang sometimes, soft little hums from a language Callan didn't know, but loved to hear. She didn't wait for permission anymore. She chose. Every step, every word. And Callan watched with quiet pride. But peace never lasts forever. The message arrived in the early morning, flashing red on the old comms screen. Notice. Complaint filed by local settlers regarding unauthorized alien inhabitant. Investigation team en route. Arrival ETA, 48 hours. Callan read it twice, then a third time. Alira stepped in with a mug of tea. You're pale. He didn't speak. Just showed her the screen. She read it slowly, then looked at him. Are they coming to take me? Callan's jaw tightened. No. But they filed a complaint. I'll talk to them. Alira placed the tea down. She didn't cry. She didn't panic, but she stepped closer, voice low. I won't hide. Callan met her eyes. You shouldn't have to. That day they prepared, not for a fight, but for truth. They cleaned the outpost, gathered records, made copies of the approval Callan had submitted. But most of all, they talked. For hours. About fear, about choices, about what it means to protect someone, not because they're weak, but because they matter. On the second evening, the sky turned orange as the sun lowered behind the hills. Callan stood outside, boots crunching on thin ice. Alira joined him. She wore a coat he had fixed for her, patched but strong. I'm not afraid, she said. I know, he replied. I just don't want them to make me feel small again. Callan looked at her. They can't. You're too big now. She smiled faintly. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had ever touched him like that. Not in fear, not in payment, but in choice. Do humans choose their family? She asked. Yes, Callan said. Alira's voice was steady. Then I choose you. The next morning the team arrived. 3 officers. 2 were human. 1 was a pale-skinned alien with red eyes and sharp boots. They stepped out of a small hovercraft, scanning the outpost with cold expressions. Callan stood at the gate. Alira stood beside him. The lead officer, a woman with silver rank bars, held a data reader. Callan Rowe? She asked. Yes. You've been reported for harboring unauthorized non-human presence. Callan handed over the approval chip. She's registered under Colony Code 1117, Refugee Class B, under my care. The officer scanned it. Green light flashed, valid. Still, her face remained hard. Locals are afraid, she said. They say she's a threat. Callan didn't blink. Their fear is not the law. The officer glanced at Alira. Do you wish to remain here, alien? Alira stepped forward, voice calm, firm. My name is Alira Vela. I am not a threat. I am not a slave. I am a person. And I am home. The alien officer with red eyes tilted his head, curious. You speak like someone born to silence. Alira looked at him. That's because I was. After a tense pause, the lead officer nodded slowly. Complaint closed, she said. No violations found. She turned back to the team. Let's move. As they left, the red-eyed officer paused. He looked at Alira and said softly, Few walk out of chains and still stand tall. She replied, I didn't walk out. I burned them. He smiled faintly and followed the others. Back inside, Callan placed his coat on the wall hook. Alira followed. She touched his shoulder. You were ready to fight for me. I still am, he said. But today, I fought for myself too. He smiled. She smiled back. And that night, as the stars blinked overhead, They stood by the window again, not as stranger and guest, not as protector and protected, but as chosen family. She held his hand once more, and never let go. 1 year later, the outpost no longer stood alone. Where once it was just a quiet shelter in the cold, now it was part of something bigger, a refuge center, built from metal and kindness. 4 new shelters stood nearby. Solar panels lit up the area like soft stars. Gardens grew in greenhouses. Alien children played in the snow without fear. And in the center of it all stood Alira, not as a servant, not as a refugee, but as a guide, a voice, a name. She walked the path between the greenhouses, a basket on her hip, filled with fruit from the vines she had helped plant. Children ran past her, giggling, their languages mixed, some human, some alien, some both. They didn't care about skin color or pasts or marks on the body. They only cared that they were safe. Inside the main hall, Callan stood fixing a heating unit. His hands were still rough. His back still ached from the war years, but his face had changed. There was peace behind his eyes now. Real peace. He wiped his hands and looked up just in time to see Alira walk in. "You're back early," he said. "Garden's doing well," she said. "Ely helped." "Ely?" She smiled and nodded toward the small girl hiding behind her leg, a shy alien child with dark purple eyes and soft scales on her arms. "She doesn't talk much," Alira said, "but she hums when she's happy." Callan crouched to her level. "Is that true?" The girl giggled but said nothing. Alira ruffled her hair. "She reminds me of me, afraid of warmth, unsure if it's real." Callan stood again. "So what do we do?" "We show her it is." That night the community gathered around the fire pit. There were no guards, no chains, just stories. One by one the new residents shared who they were and who they had become. Alira sat beside Callan, a soft shawl over her shoulders, her eyes bright from firelight. A young boy asked her, "Why are you the one who runs this place?" Now, she smiled, and for the first time told them everything. "I came here in a storm," she said. "I had no name left. I had no value. I believed warmth was something you had to trade your body for." She paused. "I knocked on his door," she said, placing a hand on Callan's shoulder. "And I offered myself. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought that was the only way to survive." Callan said nothing. He only listened like he always did, but instead, he gave me tea, a blanket, space to breathe. Her voice softened, and when I thought that made me weak, he told me I was strong. She looked at the children, the women, the men, every species sitting close. "You are not what they told you. You are not broken. You are becoming." And then the smallest child in the group, a boy with missing fingers and a stitched coat, whispered, "What did he ask in return?" "Nothing," she said. "That's why it changed everything." Later that night, when the others had gone to their rooms, Alira sat outside looking at the stars. Callan joined her, 2 mugs in his hands. "You were amazing," she smiled. "You were quiet." I didn't need to speak. They sat for a long time in silence. Then she whispered, "Do you know why I really stayed?" Callan looked at her. "I thought it was because you felt safe," he said. She nodded. "That was the start, but it wasn't just that. It was the day I saw you repairing your roof in the rain." He blinked. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You could have asked me to help, ordered me, expected it." She smiled. "But you didn't. You struggled alone, and I realized you were still learning how to live too, just like me." She stood up and offered her hand to him. He took it. She pulled him close, not with urgency, but with certainty, and rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't want to survive anymore," she whispered. "I want to grow." "You already are," he said. Weeks passed. A traveler from a central colony arrived with a recording unit. They wanted to document the human-alien peace outpost. They asked Alira to give a message to the universe. She stood in front of the lens wearing simple clothes, a small carved stone around her neck, a symbol of her name. She looked straight into the lens and said, "Once, I offered myself for shelter. I thought I had nothing to give but my body because I was told my voice didn't matter. But someone opened a door and gave me warmth with no demand. He gave me a name. He gave me time. And that gave me a future. If you're out there, alone, silent, afraid, listen closely. You are not a price. You are not a tool. You are someone. And you deserve a place where you are not just protected, but welcomed." The video was watched by millions, and across many frozen lands and ruined cities, people began to build doors that opened without conditions. The name of the outpost became known in every system: Hearth Post, the place where no one was left in the cold. Back in their quarters, Callan sat by the fire. Elira joined him, placing a cup in front of him without a word. She wore the same blanket he had wrapped her in that very first night. Old, patched, but filled with meaning. She sat beside him, leaned gently and placed her hand on his shoulder, just like she had done long ago. Only this time, she never let go.